Thank you, Richie. Welcome, everyone. Today is all about turf, and we're going to start with talking about the plant growth regulators in turf. Originally, we were going to have a topic that was going to be covered by Dr. Kearns from North Carolina State University. Unfortunately, we just got an email a few minutes before we got started that he had a family emergency, and so he could not join us today. But we got you covered, and Dr. Waltz is going to speak on that topic as well. I think you're going to be in good hands with both of this. So Waltz is a professor and extension specialist at the University of Georgia. He has statewide responsibilities in all turfgrass management areas, including water management. His work has been recognized by receiving numerous awards: the D.W. Brooks Faculty Award for Excellence in Extension, the Georgia Association of County Agricultural Agents Senior Specialist Award, the Walter Barnard Hill Award for Distinguished Achievement in Public Service and Outreach, and a Turfgrass Educator Award of Excellence from the Turfgrass Producers International. Clint, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Bodie. I appreciate it. Well, hello, everyone. Happy to be here. The first part of this was planned, and I've been working on this, believe it or not. I did part of my master's research back in the early 90s on plant growth regulators, and we'll cover a little bit of that. But since then, I've never really presented PGRs in their entirety for turf the way I've wanted to until today, I think. I finally got my slide set point where I think I'm happy with it. So you're going to get what I think is probably my best effort in 20 plus, 30 plus years on this for today. I get questions all the time every year about the use of PGRs in turf, particularly from the landscape industry. So I've kind of brought this back down to, let's look at this and answer the questions as I tend to get them or have gotten them through the years. I've watched colleagues talk about plant growth regulators, and many times you get a lot of data, you get a little background, you get some biochemistry, and I'm going to promise you all of that today, but we're going to wind up doing this a little backwards. And we're going to wind up answering those questions to begin with on some things and then add in the details from there. So let's shuck it down to the cob. Plant growth regulators. Question I get, will PGRs make my lawn look better? Lawns look better. And here I'm kind of approaching this from the standpoint of commercial lawn care operators. Our golf course superintendents, our sports field managers are routinely using this and have been for many years out there. So will PGRs make my lawns look better? They can. So simple answer is they can. Next question is, if I use a PGR, will I have to mow less? Probably not. Remember, we're in a quality business. It has to look good. So there's some advantages that PGRs give you, but in reality, very seldom do I actually see PGRs reduce the amount of mowing that occurs out there. It changes the patterns a little bit, or the use of a mower, but it offers you some flexibility. So a reduced amount of mowing? Probably not for us in the southeastern United States. Will PGRs make me money? Again, probably not out there. So it's going to be a little bit different aspect to things. So again, these are questions that are asked of me fairly quickly, and quick answers on those. So then it becomes, why do I use a PGR? And a lot of it comes down to this right here: rainfall and weather on it. So again, when it comes to commercial lawn care operators and sod producers, there's certain years through the course of 24 years at the University of Georgia now when I tend to get more questions and inquiries about use of plant growth regulators in turfgrass. There's several things that are very common in those requests. One is wet years. So let's go back here. You look at 2021, that's the green bars on these. And this is the monthly rainfall total on the UGA Griffin campus where we're located. But 2021, June, we see somewhere in...
Yes.
Okay. So in June, here in Griffin, we got somewhere close to 5.5 inches of rain. In July, almost 7.5 inches of rain in July of 21. And in August, somewhere north of 6 inches of rain on those. That's the growing season for our warm season grasses. So when you're getting that much rainfall through the course of the year, our soils are wet. Our landscape companies are having a hard time staying in front of mowing. Grasses are growing out there. Several things. Grass is growing faster than get to it. One is they can't get out to it because it is raining. As a result, days are getting lost. Crews are getting stacked up. You've got more to do, then you can say grace over in the course of a day. And then the soils are wet and we worry about tracking or rutting up soils and those kinds of things. So it's these situations here whenever I get most inquiries about can I use a PGR just to help me keep my nose above water, so to say, on this one. So 2021 is a prime example from a weather standpoint of just how much rainfall we got and when those inquiries and interest in plant growth regulators came from the landscape industry out there. So very common. So again, landscape industry, best suited PGRs for us in the Southeast, best suited for warm season species, Bermudagrass, Zoysia grass. To a lesser degree, Centipede and St. Augustine, it can be used. We can certainly get activity on both of those. Bermudagrass and Zoysia grass lawns is where we really start to see some benefits. The other is, and again, just simple truths, shucking it right down to the cob. There's several growth regulators. We're going to cover them all. But the primary growth regulator that we're talking about there, and the one that everybody's asking questions on, is Trinexapac-ethyl. And I've got it up there listed as Primo or Primo Max on it. For vernacular, probably it's just Primo. The Max came along a little bit later in its development, and I believe that was a matter of some odor reduction is what the MAXX portion of it is on the things. But if we say Primo, we are talking Primo Max on it. It's well past its period for exclusivity, so it can be replicated. And as a result, it's off patent, and other companies like QualiPro have got it. So Tenex is a QualiPro product, if I'm not mistaken, and Groom is another Trinexapac-ethyl product that's out there. And there's a couple of others. Best I remember that it didn't work very well. Apparently, it didn't come off the corncob carrier or the carrier on the thing very well. So it didn't sit around long. It wasn't used very long, but Governor was one as well. You may still see or come across. Some combination products out there that contain Trinexapac-ethyl. Legacy is one. It's a combination of Trinexapac-ethyl and fluoropyrimidol. And I'll show you here in a minute. There's actually, we can go ahead to that next slide on it. So there are our primary PGRs that we use in turf. And you'll notice that last one down there, that's Musketeer. So that's Trinexapac-ethyl, fluoropyrimidol, and paclobutrazol with those. I'm going to use this slide to talk a little bit about how we classify plant growth regulators, either type 1 or type 2. Type 1s, we'll just say go back in history, and those are growth regulators, but they worked a different way or work in a different pathway within the turf or within the plant to cause regulation. And even in some old herbicides, sublethal rates of herbicides are type 1 type of plant growth regulators. So all of the ones we're looking here are type 2s, type 2 growth regulators. The uptake, and we'll get into this in a little bit more detail as well, but Primo and Anue are ones that are foliar absorbed, and there's some things to think about that one. Where they operate biochemically, their mode of action, MOA, mode of action. So just a reference point for all of y'all. And then what species turfgrass species that they're labeled in that are particularly pertinent in the Southeast. I didn't want to include all the cool season grasses on those. So if we've got some friends out there that are in Minnesota, there's some cool season grasses where these work as well. But for us in the southeastern United States, our warm season grasses, these work exceptionally well on those. Some other turfgrass regulators. So these are ones that are out there on the market. They can still be used on those. Embark or fluidide has been around since, probably the late 50s, early 1960s. On it. Its primary thing that it was used for many years for was seedhead control. Same thing with malic hydrazide on it, the old retard or slow grow product. As I was putting this together and fleshing it out, I came across the old imidaclor. I haven't seen that particular product in probably 25 years out there. And we do still have proxy. So if there's anything off of this slide that from a turfgrass management standpoint, I would wind up putting a little bit of a star by it, be proxy. It's certainly one that's still used out there. And we'll go into more detail, but spoiler alert, Seedheads is where it winds up really kind of shining on it, okay? So those are the products we're looking at, the growth regulators that we typically see in turf. One is, it's not a one and done situation. So when our landscape industry wants to use plant growth regulators, they're trying to get caught up on mowing after weather events like what we've talked about before. The reality is it can help there, but to truly see the benefits of plant growth regulators, it's that second, third, fourth application. And we'll talk about those here in a minute as well. But it's multiple applications. You see a benefit on one, but you really see the benefits on the second and third and the fourth if you get into that one. And those benefits are improved turf grass color. Now, for us in grass, that means greener grass, darker green grass, and typically a canopy density, a tightening and thickening of the canopy density. So as we, long story short, and spoiler alert yet again, as we suppress growth or hold vertical growth down, the canopy winds up thickening up. The first application needs to be early in the season and then continue on throughout the growing season on those. The first application, it may be 10 to 14 days before you really see growth suppression. So again, these are the realities of plant growth regulators out there. So if you're thinking about doing it, just understand how they're going to work and what those reasonable expectations are going to be. The idea that I'm going to go put a growth regulator down this week and next week I won't need to mow, wrong. That's not the way it's going to work out there. And then we have this thing with most of our PGRs referred to as the rebound effect. So when the grass comes out of regulation, again, we've stored an awful lot of energy reserves back in the plant. And as a result, we tend to see the plant actually outgrow if it had not been regulated at all. So that's a rebound effect that we can see and has been seen many times. So it can bite you in the rear end. You wind up getting 4 to 6 weeks out, one application, or even after your second application, all of a sudden you've got more grass than you can shake a stick at and you can't stay on top of your mowing on that thing. The air temperatures can affect duration of your growth regulation. As we get a little bit warmer, that duration can shorten. For the landscape industry, if we can get 4 to 6 weeks, and 4 weeks is really kind of what I would be anticipating and expecting. A 6-week kind of control for most of us on our warm season grass is not. Can it be achieved? Yes. Can we see it in research? Yes. Do we effectively see it out there in application? Generally not. But I think 4 weeks is very, very achievable on it. Now, we can have a discussion all day long as to whether repeat applications on 28-day cycles is a method that the landscape industry can make money on. That's a whole different ball of wax. So, from our standpoint as scientists, it's a matter of how do these products work? How do you work? How do they work? How do you make them work? It's not so much a how do we make them work in a particular economic business model type of thing. Can I make them work? Absolutely. Just understand that you're probably going to get about 4 weeks out. That 5th or 6th weeks, you may start to look at that rebound effect on some of these. Okay. So here's where you really see a benefit. So the landscape industry. So, all right, you talked about some of these things and say there's some benefits, but there's also some limitations on those. So what is it? It's that mowing quality. You're going to get a better mowing quality than reducing the total number of mowings out there. Okay. So in those years, like what I was showing with that rain in 2021, what it's going to do is give you a couple of days, generally plus, not so much minus, between rainfall events or between mowing events there, that you can actually maintain mowing quality with that. Without regulated plants, you get about 7 or 8 days and you get back on that property. It's had rain on it. And next thing you know, you're scalping. And I'll show you some pictures here in a minute. Whereas regulated, so if you've had plant growth regulators on it, so regulated property, you get back out 7, 8, 9 days. When you make that mowing on it, it mows out and cleans up much better. And it's an overall improved quality and appearance for your lawn and your customer on this. So we have fewer clippings. We don't have tire tracks or ruts out there because we're mowing whenever their soils are wet and subject to rutting up. We reduce some of our soil compaction. Of course, we wind up getting greater compaction when soils are wet than if they're kind of field capacity or drier. The reality is you're unlikely to decrease the number of mowings on those. You're just going to buy yourself a couple of days if rain or other weather events make it such that you can't stay on a routine or on a cycle that you're accustomed to. That's where the benefit is. This is an old photograph I found as I was putting this together. I think I got this from a colleague of mine at one of the chemical companies. This particular product, this SP5075, I think that was the original experimental number for Legacy, which is that combination product. That's that prepackaged combination product of Trinexapac-ethyl and fluoropyrimidol. On this golf course fairway, the left-hand side has been regulated. The right-hand side has not been regulated. And you'll notice very simple and easily, at least the clippings on these, so it's on the same mowing frequency, that kind of thing, being mowed with a real mower, Bermudagrass, Tifway Bermudagrass fairway down here. And what you wind up seeing in here too is some scalping spots, whereas you don't see the scalping over here. So this is the benefit of regulation. as opposed to not being regulated whenever we get those rainfall events or regular rainfall events, high rainfall on that, and being able to get an extra day or 2 or 3 between mowing events out there. So on the left, you're not busting out the blower and blowing off clippings. On the right, there's more work and labor that goes into it. So not only mow it, it doesn't look as good, and we've got to wind up blowing off clippings as well. So more work that kind of goes into it with it. So that's where you see some benefits right there, is those clippings and scalping. And here's a situation where it took up at the NC State Field Day. Gosh, this was still years ago on it. So non-treated right there in the square, how much that was scalped, whereas to the right of it, underneath the word scalping, ironically, I forget which one that was. I was probably a Legacy, again, the combination product of Trinexapac-ethyl and fluoropyrimidol. But you see the darker green color. They're growing at the same time. They're being mowed all at the same time, but less scalping going on over here in the regulated plot as opposed to the non-regulated plot when mowed, say, once a week or once every 7 or 8 days type of thing. So when landscapers ask me, will it help? The answer is yes, it will. It hasn't changed your mowing routine. You're still coming out on a regular basis. You may be getting out at day 8 instead of day 6, returning back to that property at day 8 instead of day 7 or 6 on it. And when you're done, it's looking much more professional, and being able to drive away from it and not have to wind up cleaning that back up. Excuse me, this here's the on it split screen thing. So hopefully I talked you through that one reasonably well on it as well. And yeah, there we go. So there's our legacy product. You wind up seeing the scalping up above, up here, back behind it on some of these different replication of it. And the other notice is that darker green color in the center of it. So the running check right here, so this would be a non-regulated between the 2 white dots. So that's not receiving any application. That's what we refer to in the research side as a running check. That's essentially a non-treated on it. So darker green color relative to the non-treated in the middle, less scalping, overall better looking, higher quality, tighter density. So we're going to suppress vertical growth, not lateral growth. So we're suppressing vertical growth, lateral growth, and canopy density, which winds up helping us with recovery to some degree in some areas. We still need to fertilize. So if I'm putting PGR out and I'm starting it down, why do I fertilize it? Well, yes, you're getting a darker green color. You're getting a tighter canopy density. And again, all these benefits are greatest after the second, third, fourth application. You see it to some degree after the first, but you really wind up picking up those benefits after that second application, a week or 2 after that second application. Then they just kind of maintain if you stay on schedule with things. But the plant's still growing. It's still pulling nutrients from the soil. So yes, you still need to continue to fertilize. You're not fertilizing particularly for color as much anymore, but you're still fertilizing for growth of that plant. You still have nutrient uptake occurring. Okay. A downside, injury, particularly after the first application, is we can wind up having what's referred to as bronzing. And we'll talk about that a little more specifically here in a few minutes. But realize it's temporary. On the golf course and sports field side, where you may be mowing a fairway twice a week, or a middle to high end sports field, you may be mowing twice a week. It mows out in, say, 7 to 10 days. In a landscape situation, it may take 1 or 2 mowings, which may be as much as 2 weeks. But that bronzing does mow out. It is temporary. It tends to be just the leaf tips most of the time on it. So you can get some injury, particularly after the first application, early in the season. If you get it out and you wind up getting some cool nighttime temperatures, we tend to see that a little bit more. At least that's what I've observed, is that our injury tends to be a little bit more exacerbated. Now, here's a secret to that. If you have good coverage and everything has been sprayed, it's kind of hard to pick up the injury. The discerning eye might get it, but if everything looks kind of the same, it's not so bad, not so objectionable. If you miss anything, have any skips, then you've got grass that's non-regulated, not treated, and then all of a sudden it does pop out and it's a little more noticeable kind of thing. So as with all pesticides out there, even coverage is absolutely critical for some of this. Some other questions I get about it: what about seedhead suppression, particularly for Zoysia grass, and then some other industrial areas and that kind of thing with these? My experience has been Primo or Trinexapac-ethyl doesn't do very well with seed heads by itself. You couple it up with a either Cutlass or Trimmit or Proxy, then you can wind up improving seed head suppression on that. And there's a difference between shortening seed heads and suppressing them. One thing we will see with some of these PGRs is that we'll shorten seed heads and seed stalks on them such that the stalk sits down in the canopy. The seed head is still there, it's just sitting in the canopy, and it doesn't look near as objectionable than if the seed stalk gets up over the top of the canopy. So shortening that seed stalk is not always a bad thing. We get it down in the canopy, the mower stays over the top of it, you don't get that down appearance of it. Whereas suppression means we'll really just reduce the number of seed heads on those. And some of those old type 1 PGRs reduce the overall number of seed heads on those with them out there as well. And then any of our golf guys out there, and it comes to annual bluegrass or POA, but there we're talking about actual suppression. We don't want seed heads at all because that's where it affects play at the game. On the sports field side and the golf side a little bit on the overseeding aids. So if we're going to seed early, overseed early, say late August, early September, when the Bermudagrass is still actively growing or aggressively growing, regulating the Bermudagrass such that it's not growing too fast and the seed are able to actually get down into the canopy and then suppress the Bermudagrass so it doesn't take back over. We get good germination and good catch of that ryegrass. PGRs are being used as overseeding aids for that. So 3 to 5 days prior to seeding, there's no pre-emergence real effect from either Primo or Anue in those, and those would be those type 2 foliar absorbed PGRs for that one. So if we're looking at them as an overseeding aid, something that we could do, but you definitely want to look a little bit more closely at the Primo or Anue products for those types of applications with those. Disease and insect damage. So this is another one of those things. Just be aware, particularly for my Zoysia grass guys out there or anybody that may be growing Centipede grass or St. Augustine grass. If we've get some disease in it, while it's being regulated, it's going to be slower to recover and come out of the disease symptomology. So it may persist a little bit longer, even after you come back in with a rescue application for those. So we get a little bit of large patch in Zoysia grass. It's really regulated. It's going to sit there for a while before it winds up really kind of coming out of that. Similarly, Bermudagrass. Last year was a great year where we had just wonderful activity of fall armyworms. Yay, us out there. So if you've gotten fall armyworms hit your Bermudagrass, again, you're going to be a little slower for recovery. Bermudagrass will come back, but a little bit slower for recovery. Likewise, fall armyworms like Bermudagrass and tall fescue pretty well. They'll hit other species, but boy, they can really make a mess on tall fescue and Bermudagrass. So you want to be on a little bit of a preventative program for possibly fall armyworms if we have a year of them, or even say a disease situation. So if tall fescue in the Atlanta area, Charlotte area, Birmingham, what have you, you may want to make sure that you're on a preventative fungicide program such that if you get a little bit of a brown patch in your tall fescue, you're protected out there. And then if you do get into some of this situation, you might want to consider not applying or making that reapplication of your PGR afterwards on those. Things to think about. Another one to think about is a little bit the effect of soil types. And this is going to be very much the case on our root uptake type of PGRs out there. So on clay and loamy soils, research has shown a decrease in longevity of activity. So when you might be getting that 4 to 6 weeks, and for some of those, you realistically can get 6 weeks on some of those root uptake ones out there. But we do see a decrease in longevity, and that's linked to a decrease in water uptake, therefore decrease in PGR uptake. So in clay soils, loam soils, not bringing water up as well. As a result, it's not bringing the PGR up into the plant. Likewise, when we've got too much water in the soil, you've got anaerobic conditions, so your oxygen diffusion rate is lower. And that oxygen diffusion rate being lower means we have more of a rapid degradation of the PGR. So the soil microbes are breaking it down in these situations. And if it's breaking down, then the PGR doesn't have active material there to be taken up into the plant and do the regulation. As I said, these are much more prone on the root-absorbed PGRs, things like Cutlass and Trimmit, or your fluoropyrimidol and paclobutrazol products. So if you're considering some of those clay loam soils, just make sure you're watching your water. And in years where you don't have rainfall or rainfall is excessive, then this could wind up being a problem. Sandy soils tend to work better. We tend to see improved water uptake. and therefore increase PGR uptake and actually a little bit better for some of these under sandier soil. So making corrections after today with those. So things that we see, the improvements, color, darker green color. We do see increasing chlorophyll content, and it can be very much and has been argued that if it's the same number of same amount of chlorophyll within the plant, but we wind up shortening the leaf, we've got less volume than it in, and as a result, you wind up seeing greater. So whether we've actually got more chlorophyll in the plant or whether we've got the same amount of chlorophyll just packed into a smaller volume, either way, there's more chlorophyll, and as a result, the benefits that we see and enhancements that we see to our turf out there is a darker green color. Again, that's going to persist for about 3 to 4 weeks after application, and you won't see that darkening green for about the first week or so. After that, it'll start to pick up, and then you get that second, third, fourth application throughout the growing season. It's not that it gets darker and darker, but you just don't lose that dark green color. It gets green, stays dark green, and it's there. Same thing with canopy density. I know I've already touched on some of this a little bit. It gets tighter, it gets thicker. We've got more plants per unit area, and I got a picture for that for you here in a minute too. And again, we really see this take off after the second application. So make your first application, week, 10 days later, you start seeing an improvement, but it's not what it's going to be. And then you get to week 4, you make your second application, week 5 after the initial application, and all of a sudden things really start to wind up looking much different, and in many cases much better. Darker green plant, tighter canopy. When you mow, it mows easier, it's more uniform, it's just a better overall looking grass. And that's one of the reasons our golf courses use it and stay on regulated turf, is that improved uniformity with it throughout the course of the growing season. You don't have spikes where it's tall grass, short grass, and somewhere in between grass. It's all very consistent, and they can provide a uniform product, whether it's on a golf course or a sports field. Can you do the same thing in landscapes? Absolutely. But it's a matter of getting on the program and staying on the program. So when it comes to Primo or Trinexapac-ethyl, it's the most researched plant growth regulator in the turf world, if not altogether out there. Through the last 25 years, maybe closer to 30 years, the amount of research that's been done on Trinexapac-ethyl, whether it's related to heat or drought or shade, some of these abiotic stresses out there, fertility management, all these kinds of things have gone back out with the advent of Trinexapac-ethyl. And we've seen improved drought stress tolerance. We've seen improved heat stress tolerance on warm and cool season grasses when regulated on a program with Trinexapac-ethyl. We have seen improved shade persistence on some of these grasses. Some Bermudagrass hanging in some shady areas that would not otherwise have been if they weren't regulated on a regular basis. So all these things are what research has shown. I've seen some of it myself. Now, there are limits out there as well. So it doesn't mean we can wind up growing Bermudagrass under complete darkness. Some shade, where beforehand it would thin and open up. Here we can maintain a tighter canopy density and darker green color under some limited shade for Bermudagrass. PGRs are used, particularly on athletic fields, to delay fall dormancy and retain some green color. It's used up north on Kentucky bluegrass and some others to retain some color as we start to kind of move into cool periods on things. It's already greening up on its own, but intensifying it up there. And then likewise, grass that has been regulated the previous season, we've seen improved green up the following year on some of that regulated grass as well. And that's probably a matter of, as we regulate it, storing some of those energy reserves and then having reserves there to come out whenever we get favorable environmental conditions in the spring for green up with it. So all these are things that research has shown, many studies, many trials. More often than not, these things here have been consistent. Every now and then you can show me a study that says it's a little less than consistent, but overall we're there. So we'll talk a little bit here about the regulators themselves out there. I know I've already mentioned some of these. There's Primo, Trinexapac-ethyl, Cutlass, Fluorprimidol. It can be used on putting greens. So is Primo. But one thing with Cutlass is it's much more of a greens grade one out there. Trimmit or paclobutrazol, again, used on putting greens. There's some other things with it. Legacy is that two-way. And then one of our newer ones that's only been on the market for, say, I don't know, maybe 5, 6, 7 years is Anue. Prohexadione. It's actually been a growth regulator. It's been used in other areas out there for quite some time. But as far as using it in turf, it's a little bit more of a newcomer up there. I promised you a little bit of biochemistry, so there it is. with it. So the pathway that our type 2 growth regulators inhibit is your gibberic acid biosynthesis pathway. If I were to give a test at the end of this, y'all would have to be given a sheet of paper and you would have to re-diagram this back out correctly. That's what I had to do in plant growth and development, as well as part of my master's on it. But this is more or less show you is that the Trimmit, Cutlass and Trimmit, which is your fluoropyrimidol and paclobutrazol, this is early in the GA pathway and where it inhibits and where we see these two products affecting. Remember, those are also root absorbed, whereas our two foliar absorbed materials, that would be Anue and Trinexapac-ethyl, that are late in the pathway. And that's on down here at your 3-beta hydroxylase synthesis and on this one between GA9 and GA4 and gibberic acid and GA20 to GA1 on some of these. So early pathway, these ones, late pathways, that one. So that's as complicated as we're going to get, but I had to do it just because, I did on this. So we'll talk a little bit about the individual PGRs now, more so than we already have. It is off patent. Trinexapac-ethyl is off patent with it. Leaf uptake, no soil or root activity. As a result, when you spray it, you want a nice even coverage of your foliage, but you can get your spray volumes down 20 to 30 gallons per acre. So you don't need to have large spray volumes with this. Those larger spray volumes, yeah, you can get some leaf cover, but you also get a good bit of movement off the canopy and down into the root zone. So 20 to 30 gallons per acre. In the landscape industry, that tends to be on the low side. Many of our landscape companies are going out with guns and the True Green type guns, and your carrier volume is much higher than that. You've got to get those back down. I did mention the bronzing. So your first application, rate and air temperatures are certainly the factor on those. You want to avoid overlaps, because if you get overlaps, then you're going to get overregulation, but you also increase your opportunity for bronzing. If you're in a golf course or sports field where you're mowing maybe twice a week, on some of those types of things, that mow out will typically mow out. It's transient, will mow out in the first 7 to 10 days. In the landscape industry, it may be somewhere closer to 14 days after that second mowing operation out there. Research has shown reduced leaf uptake with iron and calcium added into it. So adding iron in to reduce, and we've seen this one through the years as well. Folks want to add iron to the spray tank to improve greening and reduce the bronzing. Well, you actually reduce leaf uptake, and when you reduce leaf uptake, you reduce the overall effectiveness of the PGR, here in this case, Trinexapac-ethyl. Some work has been shown out there that manganese, Me, helps improve regulation out there as well. So it helps with the greening and improves turf regulation as well with things. So here's an example of kind of what you've got. This is actually a homeowner that's done this. This is on a Zoysia grass lawn. It's an experimental, UGA experimental 54-9 is the experimental Zoysia grass cultivar. At this point, it's mid-May. It's had 2 applications of nitrogen, iron, and Tenex, which is Trinexapac-ethyl. Mowing height is 1 1/4 inches. And the box there in the middle is actually a non-treated. So he's putting down a box top or a doormat or something other along those lines. So whenever he's making his applications, that spot in the middle is not getting treated. And you can clearly see a color difference on it. So the surrounding grass there after 2 applications is a darker green grass. And then the next picture, again, that's the same square. Here we're just down a little bit more, say, small dog height, looking at it from his eyes. And you can see that grass is a little bit taller inside that non-regulated one as well. So he's suppressing the height. It's hard to tell on the canopy density with something like Zoysia grass that's already a tight canopy density on the grass itself. But definitely getting a height response, which should improve his uniformity when he mows, should make it a little bit easier for him to mow in that respect. And if you're not catching such tall grass, it's going to wind up giving you some opportunities for, if he misses day 4 or day 5, picking up at day 6 or 7, it's not going to wind up being particularly difficult for him. So that's right there in a home lawn, Zoysia grass kind of situation with it. So we're looking at total non-structural carbohydrates. So we spray our Bermudagrass with this. What's it do to our non-structural carbohydrates? So this was Tifway 419 Bermudagrass. We were on 6-week intervals, not weed intervals. All right. So we're doing a little bit more editing once we're done with this presentation, but that's 6-week intervals, not weed intervals in between. So we were whenever I was doing this, not only wanting to know what we're doing, but also at that point, we're looking at a little bit of that rebound effect. How real is it? I mean, quite honestly, we didn't really see the rebound effect at 6 weeks, but I have seen it on other golf courses and other places. So it's real. My research just didn't show it back in the 90s. But the results were we saw greater total non-structural carbohydrates in the roots and the shoots, which is a good thing. We want those carbohydrates in. That's stored reserves that Bermudagrass can use for coming out of dormancy the following year, recuperating from disease or insect attack, overall improved plant health off that. So greater TNC or total non-structural carbohydrates was good. And then the other was, at least in my work, I showed no adverse effects of repeat applications on total non-structural carbohydrate reserves. So through the course of a growing season, we're doing that. And as a result, the following year, we didn't see a reduction in overall TNC reserves. So that plant's utilizing its resources a little bit better out there. Okay. So this is a colleague at Purdue University, and they're looking at percent POA control compared to the untreated plots. And lo and behold, here, what you actually see is with Primo at 12 ounces per acre, we actually saw an increase in POA. So that's not control, that's stimulation on it. But as we've seen and used on golf courses and sports fields through the years, the product Cutlass or fluoropyrimidol, we do actually see a reduction in overall annual bluegrass. So a little bit of control on it and a little bit is a plus out there. So you got to be up a little bit on rates, 8 to 16 ounces. We get us down as low as 4 ounces and add it with a little bit of Primo, essentially no control up here whatsoever on annual bluegrass with that one. So we would not look at Trinexapac-ethyl as a POA control option out there. Old weed science adage, all herbicides are plant growth regulators, but not all plant growth regulators are herbicides. So what's it do to roots? I forget where I got this one from. This one I've got years ago. I think it came from a chemical company rep. This is off of Putting Green Heights grass. There, nice little clear picture of root density, root mass, and root length under regulated grass versus non-regulated grass. On putting green systems, and I can't remember whether it's Bermudagrass or bentgrass. Just from that old blurry picture, I would almost say it's Bermuda, but I could be mistaken. But there is certainly a situation where you see increased root proliferation and depth under regulated grass. So again, that grass will continue to photosynthesize. It's taking those photosynthates. They're putting them somewhere. It's using that energy. It's just not sending it up. It's sending it somewhere else in the plant. And we've seen increased root mass. We've seen increased rhizomes, those kinds of things with it. So that energy is going out there. Prohexadione, Anue, leaf uptake, root activity, no soil activity. So much like what we were talking about with Trinexapac-ethyl. Low spray or carrier volumes, 20 to 30 gallons per acre is where we need to be putting in. If you look at the label, non-onyx surfactants suggested. They do see some bronzing, or we have seen some bronzing. I've worked some with prohexadione. It's been many years ago. It was still experimental whenever I was working with that one last here in Griffin. With it, we did see some bronzing on it on 419 Bermudagrass and on some TIF Sport Bermudagrass. The thing I remember about working with prohexadione or Anue before it was ever Anue was that I never saw it really outperform Trinexapac-ethyl. So it was kind of just another PGRs the way that kind of went. I wouldn't say it exceeded anything. Did it reduce clippings? Yep. Did it darken grass up? Yep. Did it tighten up the canopy? Yep. But so did Trinexapac-ethyl right there with it. I believe some other research has actually shown that it winds up maybe extending PGR duration, especially if it's mixed with one of the others, one of the root absorbed type 2. So the fluoropyrimidol or paclobutrazol on it. Speaking of fluoropyrimidol or Cutlass, root absorbed, you tend to get a little bit longer suppression, growth suppression out of this. And that's the reason you might combine it with Trinexapac-ethyl like the Legacy product or with the Musketeer product. Research has shown for our cool season grasses out there an increase in tillering for tall fescue and Kentucky bluegrass, both with those. So using fluoropyrimidol or Cutlass on cool season grasses, you can see a benefit with increased tillering, which then winds up increasing canopy density as well with those out there. Paclobutrazol, again, another type 2 root absorbed, poor foliar uptake. You get longer growth suppression with it. So again, as a result, you tend to team that one up with Trinexapac-ethyl. In the landscape industry out there would be good. Cool season grasses, again, increased tillering. This is one out there that we've used in certain situations for shorter seed heads. So the seed head's getting suppressed down or getting shortened down to within the canopy. So it's underneath the mowing. As a result, you're not getting that poor quality of cut look to it. And with it, the seed heads are still there. They're just not as sticking up over the top of the canopy. Likewise, we have seen situations where we've had Trimmit being used on golf course fairways or tee boxes or whatnot, and then the following year it's gone off of regulation, but the following year we wind up actually seeing a reduction in POA plants. So there's some pre-emergence, and it may be getting 20 or 30% control, so nothing that we would consider great or good. But when you're getting some assistance or some help, it's kind of hard to argue an awful lot on some of that with it out there. Proxy is another one that's used. It's a leaf uptake, and it's different. This is not a type 2 growth regulator. It's the fawn. So this is very much one that's used for seed heads. It does have some growth regulation, but seed head reduction and suppression are certainly a large part of what it's used for out there. Here, though, we've got to talk about site uses, where the other ones, I'm not aware of any restrictions on site uses. Here, Ethafon or Proxy is labeled for golf courses, parks, and sports turf, and explicitly on the label says not for your residential use. So you might use Proxy along roadside areas or industrial sites. If I've got commercial folks in here, that would be sports turf or parks, but not residential with those. And it's interesting too that this one also has not only annual bluegrass or Poa annua, but white clover on it. And you've got to get Ethafon or Proxy out prior to emergence of the seed heads. If we can get it applied before we see the emergence of the seed heads, we can keep seed heads at bay with Proxy. So we get a little bit closer to true control of seed heads. With air temperature, for when it comes to growth suppression, it's only going to work when the air temperatures are a little bit warmer, so 65 degrees and rising. Let's see, I'm looking at time and knowing we've got another presentation here in a minute, but I want to ask some questions on this one. Early history, Richie's going to make the slide set. So from the history standpoint, this is the stuff that, we cover the things up at the beginning of really what I get questions about. This is where we get a little bit less. So I'm going to kind of bump through these a little bit quicker. Our history, the earliest PGRs were seed head suppression was a predominantly used form for especially highway right-of-ways and industrial sites. The next generation came along with the early pathway GA inhibitors, things like fluoropyrimidol and paclobutrazol, the neocinema. I think that's another misspelling right there. I got to double check that one. The ARES product. We still were, in some cases, safety was improved, but we were still our desired turf, but we're still getting some injury and that kind of thing on those. Some herbicidal activity I just mentioned. The other thing, that paclobutrazol is also in the same chemical family as several of our fungicides. So we have seen some actual fungicidal or disease abatement as well with using paclobutrazol. It's a trizol, just like some of our fungicides out there. So Banner would be an example of one of those trizols out there. So it's that same family. So we do see the same one as any of y'all out there, my older guys that are gals that may remember the old Rubigan product. It's in the same fungicide family that we have as Rubigan, great fungicide, also worked real well as a pre-emerge for Poa annua with it. So that's where paclobutrazol falls in that same group out there. What's scary here is our most recent evolution is the late pathways. That's your Primo or your Trinexapac-ethyl and your Anue with those. And Trinexapac-ethyl was first synthesized by Ciba-Geigy in 1983 and received experimental use permit from EPA in 91. So that's our most recent evolution. We really haven't seen anything new. What's happened in the last 10 to 15 years when it comes to plant growth regulators is where you start getting these premixes. So you're putting a type 1, a type 2 with a late GA inhibitor with a type 2 early GA inhibitor and pre-packaging those together, kind of like the Legacy product or the Musketeer product. That's where we've seen the advancements out there. We've covered all the desirable characteristics. Oh, this is if we were to design the perfect PGR out there. Reducing cost, you may be able to reduce a little bit of labor cost, but overall, you're still going to get out and mow. You got to wind up making that turf look like it's been mowed, have a clean cut appearance to it. You can reduce your equipment wear and tear a little bit. Fertility, with time, you might wind up bringing some of that down on it. And then we have seen some folks that have used PGRs to improve safety for their maintenance personnel. So where you've got steep slopes, bunker fingers, roadsides, things like that, where maintenance personnel have a chance of getting hit or having a hard time maintaining it, PGRs have served a function or role there on things as well. With that, some important dates in 2025, the Southeastern Turf Conference in Tifton, Georgia on November the 5th. We'll have more information as closer we get to it, probably somewhere early fall, September or so, on our website, georgiaturf.com, and we'll give you that in a minute. But Southeastern Turf Conference, May 5th down in Tifton, and then our biennial Sod Producers Field Day in Perry at the Super Sod site on November the 6th. So we'll be in Tifton on November 5th. That evening, we'll come up I-75 and then have our Sod Producers Field Day the next day on November 6th. With that, thank you. Appreciate your time. I'm happy to take some questions if, Bodie, you want to navigate those. And there's our website, georgiaturf.com. So I'll stop the share. That way we can look at any questions if there's something other out there that I assume they're putting them in the chat or what have you with those, Bodie.
Thanks, Clint. And thank you also for putting me in that category that can remember Rubigan. So
it was a good product.
Okay, we have some really good questions. If PGRs increase lateral growth and speed up recovery, do sod farms use them when sprigging and establishing fields? If not, why not?
My experience has been they don't. That recovery on that one is much more of a type of thing once you've got a well-established plant, whereas you're sprigging a field, you don't have a well-established plant to pull from. So they're not going to do it there, one, and then the other is the cost and expense of getting people out there on it. And during that sprigging phase, you about turn those fields into a rice paddy, so you couldn't get a sprayer out there on them if you wanted to. So there's several logistical reasons why we don't see that. Now, we do see sod farms once they get, remember, you're looking at something like Trinexapac-ethyl or Anue, that's a foliar uptake, so you have to have enough foliage to take it into the plant. So that's another reason you wouldn't do it during sprigging. So once they get, say, 70, 80% surface coverage, it is fairly common then to see many of our sod producers using PGRs, and they'll see exactly that. They'll tighten that canopy up a little bit faster and have it ready to market a little bit sooner. But you've got to get enough canopy density there because you've got a foliar uptake product.
Thank you. Another one from Corey. Is there any research that shows that turf under regulation can tolerate higher nitrogen inputs? At high nitrogen, zoysia can be more susceptible to fungus and thatch issues. Do PGRs make zoysia more tolerant of high nitrogen?
I would say the trend over the last 20 years has been reduced number of inputs. So anything that we can do to reduce the inputs. If an input is a PGR, can we wind up reducing the amount of nitrogen, especially if we're getting, remember, we're in a quality business. The dark green color, the tight canopy density, if we're picking that up from the PGR, we're not having to do it with the fertility. But as I said earlier, we can't neglect our fertility just because we're getting a somewhat of a visually appealing quality doesn't mean that plant still doesn't need nutrients for growth. So you can't neglect it, but the research has been more of the other direction. If we apply PGR, can we reduce the amount of nitrogen and still maintain an acceptable quality of product and maintain growth habits? So it's generally more that other direction.
Thank you. With a product like Legacy that has a foliar absorbed PGR and a root absorbed PGR, would you recommend leaving it on top or watering it in?
I'd have to check the label on that one. That's a good question. Most of these are going to be a matter of foliar absorption is going to probably happen in the first hour or two. So if you let it kind of dry on and then water it in the next 24 hours, you wind up getting the movement of the root absorbent on down in and then picked up. So let it dry on, and then turn the water on and move the root material down in so they can be taken up by the plant and the roots.
So Stephen has another question. What's the latest time in the fall season you regulate Bermuda rough?
I do get this one. That's more on that professional side, golf course side. I'm not a big fan of going, depending on where you are in the state or where you are in the southeast, and weather conditions. So if you're, say, Griffin, Macon area south, you could probably get away, whether it's a rough or a sports field. We see it on sports fields as well. Again, trying to retain some green color deeper in, maybe get that last football game in before we get dormancy, maybe last part of September. If we were, say, Griffin or Atlanta north, I will probably be more conservative and say I wouldn't go much past September 15th, if not September 1st with those. Because remember, some of our temperatures can cause some injury issues or at least aesthetic issues on that.
All right, great. Thank you, Clint. And I'm going to stop the questions on this topic so that we have time to go into the next one. Okay. And you also have time to head out because you have a prior appointment.
That's correct. So All right. Well, let me close that presentation and open the second one. And you tell me when you're ready to go, Bodie.
I am.
Okay. So we will hit share, and we'll go share screen 2. Hit share. Are we seeing the correct thing?
Looking good, man.
All right.
Yep.
Thank y'all. And I'm going to say to our audience out there, I'm going to probably skip around on this one more so because this was a 11th hour or 12th hour kind of edition. And I know I don't have time to cover everything. So I don't know what Dr. Kearns was planning on covering or going over. So this is very impromptu, but we will cover diseases from my perspective on things with it. So a lot of times the pathologists like to talk about a disease triangle. With me, I view it much more as a disease pyramid. I see it more as a three-dimensional structure instead of just a particular three-sided structure. Specifically because in turf, one of them we can manage. And that's a good thing. So the traditional disease triangle dictates that one, we must have a susceptible host. So we have to have something that can be infected and made sick. The second thing you have to have is a virulent pathogen or something other to make that susceptible host sick. So if we don't have a host that can get sick, we're in good shape. If we don't have a pathogen that can make it sick, we're in good shape. But if we have both of those and then we have a favorable environment, we have the opportunity for disease infection to occur. The fourth element to me is time. And this is where for us in turf, it's important. By and large, most of the diseases we deal with in turf are fungi. They're fungal-borne pathogens. Most of our grasses can be susceptible. There's a number of fungal organisms out there that cause disease and death. And the favorable environments happen periodically throughout the course of the year. But most of those fungal diseases need about 12 hours of favorable environment to be virulent, to infect. So if they don't have enough time, even if we have susceptible hosts, even if we have a virulent pathogen, even if we have favorable environmental conditions, if those unfavorable environmental conditions aren't there for enough time, we don't tend to have disease infection. And for fungi, we generally need about 12 hours of high humidity moisture. So here we can manage when we water. So watering such that we don't have a wet canopy density through the course of excess of 12 hours, we can reduce the amount of disease that we're going to have out there on things. So time is one we can manage in our irrigation practices, is how we manage that time that canopy is wet and have a favorable environment for a virulent pathogen to infect a susceptible host. We can manage time, and that's why, to me, the pyramid is a little more apropos for us in turf, if you would. Symptoms are those visual things we see out there. If you look at the background of this slide, that's the old, here in the Atlanta, just outside the airport, Lakewood Amphitheater, that's what it was. But that's large patch, and that's the case of large patch on common Bermudagrass. And those patches there, I took those pictures. Those patches are anywhere from 8 to 12 foot in diameter. And the one right in the center here, that's one where you've got 3 of them. 1, 2, 3 of them that have coalesced together. But this one right here was every bit of 12 foot or so in diameter. And that one was probably somewhere around about 6, and that one up there is probably pushing 8. So, but those are the symptoms of what we see out there. The signs, in this case over here, this is dollar spot in Seashore Paspalum, if I remember correctly. But there you actually see the mycelium with it, taken by a former grad student of mine with it. So that's the mycelium, that's the signs, that's the actual pathogen itself. It's fruiting bodies, mycelium, what have you, is there. You're actually seeing it there. So one, the symptoms is what you see. The other is the signs is actual pathogen itself. Fertility, high rate of nitrogen tends to encourage disease. So this time of year, we want to certainly watch what amount of nitrogen we're putting down on our warm season grasses, particularly Zoysia grass, Centipede grass, and St. Augustine grass. If we get that started a little too early, we can wind up enjoying a nice healthy outbreak of rhizoctonia, which is large patch. So we want to make sure we apply our fertility when the grass is actively growing. Try not to exceed 1 pound of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet, and grow most of our grasses between 5.5 and 6.5. Centipede tends to be a little bit lower. Zoysia grass, we want to be a little bit higher. I like to see 6 to 7, closer to that 6.5, 7 on Zoysia grass with it. Okay. So Water management, as we said, time is something other that we can do and how long that canopy is wet. So we water when the grass needs it. That's number one. Never put your grass to bed wet. So if you go out and irrigate your lawn at 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon in the spring, as the sun goes down, dew sets in, we hit 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, that canopy's still wet. And there's our 12 hours. Nobody's getting up and putting any preventative fungicide out at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. Never put your grass to bed wet. So when it comes to your irrigation, what you want to do there is, if you can think about it the backwards, we want our irrigation head to go down, let's just say 10 o'clock in the morning. And it takes you 3 hours for your irrigation cycle to run. So we want our irrigation to come on at 7 o'clock in the morning. 7 a.m., 3 hours, 10 a.m., irrigation goes down. Yes, we got some dew, but that dew forms, say, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock at night. Now, all of a sudden, we've shortened or narrowed the window for potential infection on the thing. This time of year, we're starting to see this one a little bit more. This really is a non-pathogenic fungi. So, for example, this one in the top right there, we tend to see, I have seen this one in turf and actually on grass. More often than not, I see it in mulch beds or with those hardwood mulch beds. That's one on the right-hand side. That's an early blob. It's referred to sometimes as blob or monkey vomit or even dog vomit. And it can look very much like that. You give it a day or two and it starts to dry out and looks like the one on the left. So this is one we get questions about. Got something growing out there on things. Bring it in. It's a slime mold. These tend to be non-pathogenic. The pictures on the bottom are far more common on turf, and we will see those, particularly after the weather patterns we've had here in the last few weeks. I wouldn't be surprised at all to start seeing some slime mold showing up on some leaf blades here soon. So these little gray pustules, they almost look like soot. But again, it's slime mold. It's in the same kind of grouping as these up here, but these on individual blades, they are non-pathogenic. I've had some discussions with pathologists that, oh, these can get so bad they reduce photosynthesis. Perhaps, but generally not. Most time you can drag a water hose across them or brush them with your foot. The pustules go everywhere, and then the next thing right underneath it's just a green blade of grass, and it's fine. These are non-pathogenic, means they don't really cause disease, but people see them on the grass and they get all kind of excited and that kind of thing. And this is the time of year for that on it. So slime molds out there, the Heligo species, and you got to like the names. Nothing else, you got to like the names. Monkey vomit out there. Yes, I like saying it on a thing. Talking about some of our diseases, dollar spots, a foliage disease, bleach sunken patches out there coalesce in. Mycelium are common. It's one we tend to get. We can get them on all turf species. Bermudagrass certainly can wind up being hit by dollar spot with it. To me, many times if we've got dollar spot out there, it's a little bit of an indication for me. We may need to look at our fertility on it. It may be a little on the malnourished side with it. Not always, but sometimes. And if we get dollar spot in the middle of summer, I'll get those pictures. Folks will be asked, or will ask, what do we do here? Many times there, I'll say, let's come out with a half, 3/4 pound of nitrogen per 1,000 square foot. And that tends to do it. We don't need to actually go up with a fungicide for dollar spot on Bermudagrass or Zoysia grass for that matter in the middle of summer. There are some fungicides you can put down that help with preventative, such that it's not, the outbreak isn't as bad when environmental conditions become favorable for it. So, like I said, low nitrogen levels are certainly part of it. Cool nights, and we can get cool snaps run through the southeast in the summertime out there with those. Large patch, again, you got to like pathologists. They name things as they see them. So when they has this large patch, typically on warm season grasses, it may be 3, 4, 5, 6 foot in diameter. Or as I said, in the background back there, some of those were probably every bit of 12 foot in diameter. It is a large patch. On cool season grasses, that grass becomes a little more necrotic and turns brown. And as a result, the same disease or causal organism here, Rhizoctonia, is referred to as brown patch on cool season grasses out there with those. So for tall fescue, brown patch, Bermudagrass, Zoysia grass, Centipede grass, well, it's large patch, but it's the same causal organism out there. And I'll say when it comes to our warm season grasses and large patch, we tend to see that, not that we can't see it in the middle of summer, but we tend to see this when the grasses are transitioning either into active growth and they're not hitting on all cylinders yet, or towards the end of the season, say September, October, as they're beginning to slow their growth, is when we'll see large patch a little more active on our warm season grasses. Not always the case, but I certainly will see less large patch on Centipede and Zoysia grass in June, July, and August than I do in, say, April and May, or in September, or even into October. Not that it can't happen, but it's just a matter of when you wind up expecting to see your largest outbreaks of them. If you're interested in this a little bit more, Dr. Alfredo Martinez has an excellent publication, Circular 1088. On it, I would advise you just to Google Rhizoctonia large patch in Georgia, UGA, instead of trying to go through the UGA website and trying to find that thing. You can probably Google it and hit it with about 2 mouse clicks, whereas if you try to go through the UGA site, it's going to probably be about 8 kind of thing on it. So good publication for it. I do need to go here in just a few minutes, but there's a couple things I want to cover, so I'm not going into these in great detail. That's a case of large patch on a croquet court out there. That's on a Zoysia grass croquet court, central Georgia. That's where that one was. They let that one get a little far. Will the Zoysia grass bounce back? So here in a case situation, will the Zoysia grass bounce back? Absolutely, it will, but it's going to be slow. That's the nature of the beast with Zoysia grass on this one, but here it'd be a matter of you need to get a fungicide application down, arrest the disease, probably stay on a fungicide program moving forward with it, and then mowing it down a little bit closer, tighter, such that we wind up stimulating that grass to grow and return back from those stolons at the surface and rhizome subsurface on those. But here, again, being on a program and being on a regular program to get this back would be part of it. So fortunately now we've got, when I say now, so in the last 15, 20 years, we've got some fungicides that have a 28-day residual. So things like Heritage, ProStar, Lexicon, all these are fungicides now that have a 28-day residual. Some of our older materials would give us maybe 17 to 21 days, but most of them were in that 14-day range, which certainly commercial log care, there's a limitation there on business model for a 14-day rotation. But some of these 28-day fungicide programs are out there. Products are out there now on those. This is a situation. I like this homeowner right here. This was one I actually had to meet with the homeowner. And we'll just say he has a nice house on things in a very nice neighborhood of North Atlanta. And he's got enough time to listen to his radio. And somebody on the radio told him it's time to fertilize your yard. It's time to fertilize it now. Whereas let's just say his neighbor next door, who's every bit as nice a house as this one didn't have enough time to listen to the radio and didn't hear that he needed to fertilize his yard. And as a result, he didn't fertilize his yard. And because he didn't fertilize his yard, he didn't have large patch in his Zoysia grass. And this individual wanted to know why he had disease and his neighbor didn't. Well, the whole answer may not have been purely fertility, but when this guy was putting nitrogen fertilizer down in February and in March, and his neighbor was not putting fertilizer down in February and March, we weren't stimulating that disease and having a readily available source in young tender grass whenever it did start to emerge. So his neighbor didn't have near the large patch, didn't have any actually on it. But, we calmed him down a little bit. Let's get a preventative fungicide spray out here on this. Let's keep it through about midsummer on a preventative and pick up our fertility, get our mowing height down just a notch. And it should rebound. Give me a call if it doesn't. And, I hadn't heard from him since on it. Look at the middle picture on this one. That fence back there is part of the explanation of why we have such bad large patch in this one. So this was a homeowner here, a playground back here for the children, Zoysia grass backyard, but had the whole things gated off and as a result, or fenced off. And as a result, there was no air movement, air drainage in this one. With no air drainage, that canopy stayed wet longer, so we had plenty of time for infection to occur on a susceptible species under favorable environmental conditions. And as a result, we had a really nice outbreak of large patch on that Zoysia grass back there. So with them, if they're going to keep that fence up, which was non-negotiable, that was definitely staying up, then we've got to wind up getting on a preventative fungicide program, especially in the spring and fall of the year. The other thing I will say about Zoysia grass for fall, I know here we are spring, early summer, wherever we may be, but thinking forward on things, and that's the case really with this left-hand photograph right here, that's large patch. That occurred in the fall of the year, so this is coming out in the spring. Here we're seeing a delayed green up. Grass that goes into dormancy sick will not recover while it's dormant. So as a result, it will come out of dormancy slow and inconsistent. And that's exactly what's happened right here. So for this lawn in the middle, get on a fungicide program in the spring and in the fall of the year such that we want to keep the disease at bay. And the photograph on the right, that's active large patch right there on Zoysia grass in a swale behind a putting green in the Augusta area on it right there. So those oranges and reds and all of just really pretty colors of that disease as it was active right there. And yes, it takes just the right person to see that as a pretty color on it. Centipede grass, the word coalesce, when we want to get them to grow together. Got our little snowman right there on it. Some of our plots on the Griffin campus, we've got Zoysia grass. And you can see where during the fall of the year, that active large patch kind of got over from one plot to the next on some of two different Zoysia grasses. Obviously very susceptible Zoysia grass cultivars. And this is another thing that here, nice little illustration. Diseases start from an infection center and move out. So they're going to radiate out in a round type pattern on those. So if they've got some way to get across free water or a little bit of plant tissue, that continue to radiate out. And that's what they did there on that one. Some expectations for fungicides, and this is one thing we see too many times with homeowners, is that, I just put a fungicide down. I applied a fungicide. Well, okay, fine. Remember, they're going to have somewhere between a 14 and 28-day residual. They're not going to last forever. They're not going to last through a spring or a fall. It's not one and done on those. It's not like a situation where I put a fungicide out, I kill out all the fungi in the canopy. Okay, maybe you did, but there's enough of those spores moving around in the air that it's always there. It's ubiquitous. You're not wind up getting rid of all of those spores. So the expectation of a single fungicide application solving all of your problems is unrealistic. That's kind of like when you get sick, the doctor gives you an antibiotic and tells you to take 10 days worth of it. Don't take 5. When you take 5 and get sick again, he's going to look at you, shake his finger and say, I told you. Same kind of thing here with this. So if you only make one application, environmental conditions are favorable for long enough, you will get reinfection in those sites. So staying on a curative or on a preventative basis out there during the right times of the year is critical on that. With those movement in the plant, we do have some that wind up moving from the base to the tip. That's called acropetal movement, moves in the xylem or the water of the plant on the thing. And that's most of our fungicides. So it's going to move out towards the growing point or towards the tip. So we do have some uptake into the plant and then movement through the plant to the tips, some of these newer fungicides. And that helps us have that 28-day kind of residual on these. So those are good things. It does move, but the reality is it's not one and done. The duration has got to be there on things. Spring dead spot. So here we are, spring. I wasn't fearful. Fortunately, I haven't seen much spring dead spot this spring. I'm aware that there's been a little bit more, say, in the South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia area, but I was concerned with the amount of temperatures that we had here in Georgia that we would see some spring dead spot issues on Bermudagrass this year. But fortunately, I haven't. So some of the Southeast has, some of it hasn't. But this is an excellent symptom right here. You pull a rhizome, if it's black, and I mean black, not brown, I'm talking Johnny Cash, man in black, black. So this is an infected rhizome. This is a healthy rhizome on Bermudagrass right here with those. So pull a sample, wash it off, clean it up, look at your rhizomes. If they are black, then spring dead spots are likely to have been part of it. It can be fairly extensive. This is off of a pond dam on a golf course. Again, pathologists got to love them. They name things as they see them. Spring dead spot. The spot is dead. It's in the spring. The misnomer is that it did all of its work and damage back in the fall of the year. So you see it in the spring, but all the work and effort was done by the disease back in the fall of the year, October, November periods of time on it. So by the time you see it, it's too late. What you do this year is you map it, you know where it is, such you can go out with your fungicide applications that following fall. So we're looking for soil temperatures to be 65 degrees and falling. We know we're going to probably need to make 2 to 3 applications of a fungicide. Most of our fungicides will be bound very quickly to the leaf surface and to the thatch or decaying leaf material right there at the top of it. So we have to get a fungicide down. This is a root-borne or soil-borne, this is a soil-borne disease. It's in the soil. So getting a fungicide into the soil where the disease is the hard part for a spring dead spot. So in the fall of the year is when we're going to make our applications. I will recommend that you go out the day before you make that application, make a light irrigate application of water. Then you wind up applying at a high spray volume, and I'm talking like 80 to 100 gallons, 120 gallons per acre. Then you irrigate immediately afterwards. I've had some landscapers say, I want to see irrigation in my rear view mirror. So they're driving off the property and irrigation is flying on the thing. The objective here is we're going to spray it. We're going to have some water films in the thatch and the upper portion of the soil. We will put it out with a high spray volume, and we'll irrigate it in with an eighth to a half inch of irrigation such that that fungicide stays in the aqueous kind of state, and we can move it from the canopy through the thatch into the soil and then let it kind of stratify within the upper inch or 2 inches of soil where that disease is active. Folks say, can I add a wetting agent? There's nothing wrong with adding a penetrative type wetting agent to help that. Anything we can do to make sure that fungicide doesn't get caught on the leaf surface, caught and bound on the leaf surface or in the thatch organic layer of the turf. So anything we can do to keep it wet and moist and moving down is what we'll need to do on that. So adding a wetting agent doesn't hurt at all. This is not a disease. This is just people being people. We refer to it as Roundup spot on it. So I will get this one and say, hey, I think I got a disease. Well, let's see what all's dying in there kind of thing on it. So, on it, looking a little bit closer on those homeowners. I love them. They help me wind up making some great pictures and great presentations out there. And yeah, fairy ring, again, some of the conditions we've had here lately. Sometimes you see the basidiomycetes, that's the mushrooms. Sometimes you just wind up seeing the green rings. Sometimes those green rings will turn necrotic and die. But the mycelium, which is actually under the ground, that's where it has released some ammonia. That ammonia has killed roots or come on up and actually killed the plant. And there it's a situation where it's gone from a green ring to a little bit higher ammonia release, and we're killing grass. And here is actually a below ground basidiomycete or a puffball. So that's what's below ground. That's the fairy ring below ground. And this is what you're seeing above ground with it right here is that brown dead grass up above it on it. And this came off of a golf course putting green, the Savannah area. This was the Bermudagrass right here on it. It was brought to me. So what do you think's doing it? And I took it, just broke the core. And lo and behold, there's your puffball right there underneath it. It was really a good picture. Here's one I picked up from a colleague, a picture, and then there you see the mycelium or fungal ring layer down in the soil layer right there. So fairy rings are there. Sometimes just green arcs. Sometimes we can mask that with picking up fertility, and sometimes it's a problem. Sometimes it's not. It doesn't always kill grass. So fairy rings are kind of fun to play with on it. I've had folks send me pictures like this. Say what to do. I'll tell you to go get the 6-year-old, give him a 7-iron, and tell him to have fun with those. So again, we're back into our important dates. Thank you for Georgia Turf. Bodie, I apologize for sprinting through this thing a little bit, and I will stop the share and we'll take a couple minutes worth of questions, but I've got to be, did I lose you?
No, I'm right here. Can you hear me?
Okay, there we go. Yes, let's see, stop the share. And we're back. I'll take a couple questions, but I'll probably got to leave in about 2 to 3 minutes.
Well, thanks again. We really appreciate you adding another hour almost to the talk. So yeah, didn't you lose your voice? Unbelievable. Okay. Yeah, I don't think that we have anything right now. Just big thank you again, and we'll let you be on your way.
All right. Well, thank you.
Take care.
Take care.
All right, folks. Well, thanks for sticking with the second hour. I think that Dr. Clint was able to do a very good job on the turf disease topic. If you have any questions, send them to him, and I'm sure that he'll pass them to either James Kern, who could not be with us today, but also our own Alfredo Martinez. He can answer those questions for you. I'm sure they can take care of it amongst themselves. And we'll try to circle back next year and get Dr. Kearns to come and speak to you. With that, happy growing, happy spring.